Hello everyone, welcome to the next episode of dormakaba Presents Tech Talk. Today we are with an individual who has literally redefined the skyline of Kolkata. He has not just evolved the entire design landscape in the city, but has also endeared the city so beautifully in his work that we are really lucky here to have him here and share his thoughts with us. With this, I would love to welcome JP Agrawal, who is the principal architect at Agrawal Agrawal Architects. Thank you so much, sir, for giving us your time here and joining us for this particular interview.
Thank you, Rashmi.
Thank you. So we'll quickly jump into the questions that we have for you. And the first question that I wanted to understand is, you've obviously seen a lot of trends come in and come go. You've seen a lot of dynamics within the industry. Given the changing trends that keeps happening so often in our sector, I wanted to check with you, what's your design philosophy or what's your design approach when you take up a new project or when you take up a new work that you do?
Since last 36 years of my practice, I realized one thing, that new things will keep on coming and going.
Okay.
But the purpose will remain the same, and that purpose is for human being utility. Okay. So when we design architecture, primarily it's a shelter.
Correct.
That shelter is a controlled environment which we are supposed to create.
Correct.
So that controlled environment has a purpose.
Absolutely.
That purpose can be the public building, that purpose can be the workspace, that purpose can be the residential building or education building.
Correct.
Or hospital.
Correct.
So what drives the concept is, the first thing is that what is the objective of doing that project? Not only the use group, but the context.
Correct.
Suppose you are doing a school for rural area, and suppose you do the school in the urban environment. The two are hell and heaven of a difference.
Correct.
So considering the whole objective, we have to perceive the project and give it a justice.
Correct.
And if at all we are driven by a single task or rather focus that we want to only create something which is out of the box, then it is not justified.
Correct. Yeah.
So first thing which I must keep aside is my ego, that I want to create a difference, I want to make it a landmark building.
Correct.
It will become a landmark at its own if at all I give a justice to the project.
Correct. Yeah.
So for me, the important is a user, number one, and number two, the context.
Okay, that's really well said, sir. The context comes literally at the core of it, and we actually see that in your work. Following this, I just wanted to understand one of the biggest buzzwords in the industry is sustainability or green buildings. It's been around for quite few years. I wanted to understand what's the ground reality of this sustainability when you work with corporates and you work with companies, and also how do you incorporate sustainability, which is so open-ended at certain times? So how do you take this forward?
I normally perceive this in two different segments. The one is, as I mentioned, about the user. So if at all the architecture is giving all kind of a comfort and utility to a user, it becomes sustainable at its own.
Okay.
The first thing is the kind of a environment which you create for the user, and number two is the materials.
Okay.
The materials which you use in that particular construction are sustainable materials or not.
Correct.
The method of construction you use can be long lasting or not. So as you mentioned about the evolution of the new materials, the biggest challenge that we are now facing is the sustainability of the new materials, environmental friendliness of the new materials.
Okay.
Because as you know,
Absolutely.
the way it used to be earlier, that 90% of the materials used in the building were the natural materials, like a brick, stone, and then the concrete came.
Correct. Yeah.
And the steel and concrete were
glass.
added. And eventually today what we see is that 90% of the materials are manufactured materials.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong, because you have to look at the reality of mass construction, in spite of so much of construction, we are not able to provide housing to all.
Yeah.
We are yet to build a lot.
Correct.
So when you look at matching this requirement for everybody, you have to think at the timeline available to you
Correct.
to construct such kind of a housing.
Correct, yes.
And such mass scale housing required that much of material also. So if you go for a natural materials, in fact you are harming the environment.
Oh my God.
You cut too much of trees.
Yeah, that is also.
You do too much of mining. So, in fact, you end up harming the environment. The way it just happened that we have moved from cotton to a lot of synthetic yarns.
Correct. Yeah.
Because only cotton cannot give the required volume
Wow.
for all of us.
Yeah.
So, we go with the reality. The reality is that the population has increased like anything. And there used to be much more poverty before 70-80 years than what we have today.
Correct.
Quality of life has to be improved, and the quality of life has a many definitions.
Correct, yeah.
And considering that our approach towards the sustainability has to flow with how we can meet the requirement, at the same time how we can make it sustainable.
Sustainable. Thank you. That's actually very well put, sir. Also, the second question that I wanted to check in with you is you obviously work with a lot of entities, a lot of clients. Today, the term client is so broad because it just doesn't mean the management. There is so many stakeholders involved. So you have your facility managers, you have your employees themselves who give their inputs in a project. You have so many other entities involved in a process, the design process. So given this, I want to understand from you, how important is client collaboration for you and how do you approach this whole process?
I perceive this in a 3-4 manners practically, because when you do for a builder, the economy is important. When you do it for institution, again the budget is important.
Yes. Yeah.
And when you do for a residence for a private residence for an individual,
Correct. Yeah.
lot many things comes into play.
Yeah.
Sometimes budget is important, sometimes budget is not important.
Right.
So when I design a private residence, I first try to understand the character of my client, what he wants, what he looks, what he likes.
Okay.
And I tell him in my first meeting that eventually you are going to stay in that building.
Correct. Yes.
So I must not build that house as per my taste,
Okay.
but I must build it as per your taste.
Okay. That's
Okay.
true.
So now you can say that the client may not be so educated. So that is my job to educate him. But I must understand his taste or her taste, the family's taste, what the family is all about. And then I try to give him something more than what he has thought of.
Okay.
Okay. But not without understanding his character,
Okay.
not without understanding his taste
Okay.
and the whole family structure.
Uh-huh.
Right? So private residence has got its own the kind of challenges,
Okay.
for an architect. And when you look at the builder's perspective, then we must understand that the project has to be commercially sustainable.
Absolutely.
I have seen architects perceiving the buildings which become so expensive for the builder that so many times the builder gets into the losses.
Correct.
I personally foresee this, or rather see this as not a good thing that architects should practice.
Okay.
I must look after the economy of my client.
Okay. Yeah, that's true.
So within the economy, what best we can do?
Correct.
One very rich client once told me that, सर आप पैसे की तरफ मत देखिए,
Acha.
पर मेरे को ना सोना जड़ना नहीं है अंदर में,
Okay.
मेरे घर में.
Okay.
So this has been a you can say one of my favorite
Lines. Lines.
that I heard from my client.
Okay.
And this is so for my builder client,
Okay.
and this is so for my private residence client, that I do not spend the money unnecessarily. I try to do the projects in a given budget.
Okay.
And I personally see that what you call monumental building, there is nothing like a monumental building.
Okay.
It is only about a good building, a good working environment. The monumental comes when you want to make a national icon,
Yeah.
or you want to make some, icon for the city also, which is going to be the public place.
Correct.
But otherwise, whatever you do has to be commercially sustainable as well as you rightly mentioned about the longevity and all.
Correct. That's really true, sir. The last question that we had for you is, you've worked obviously with several industry peers and several companies. The projects especially that you do requires a lot of collaboration, and one such brand is dormakaba. So I just wanted to understand from you just quickly, how's your experience working with them been?
Dormakaba is one of the reputed brand, and what we actually look for in the product is the reliability. We are not the engineers. We cannot get into the integrity of how it has been made.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
So we go for a good brand, which are the time-tested brand. So the dormakaba is not a new brand. I'm sure that it has got a history of not less than 50 years.
Wow.
So they evolved that engineering.
Okay.
In every fittings they produce. Mainly I know about dormakaba, about the door window fittings, etc.
Okay.
The lot of touch fittings and the floor springs, etc.
Correct.
I like about this brand that we can depend upon them.
Okay.
And at least we can be sure that what has been applied will meet its purpose for the long time.
Okay, that's really true. And with this, we'll end the session, sir. And thank you so much. This was so heartfelt and such a beautifully candid discussion. This was. Thank you so much for spending your time here with us.
My pleasure.